It had been 5 years since I'd last seen my father. The moment I entered the boardroom, he shot me a look that could curdle milk. The offices of Davison and Lowe smelled of old leather and ambition. My sister Isabel was already there, exuding an air of smug satisfaction, as if she'd just closed a hostile takeover. At the head of the massive oak table sat Richard Thorne, my father, looking less like a grieving son at a will reading and more like a king holding court. Mr. Davison, the family's longtime attorney, gave me a brief professional nod. He'd been around since the days my family still pretended I was part of the fold. No one greeted me. There were no pleasantries, no questions about my last tour of duty or whether I'd come back in one piece. But I wasn't there for them. I was there because I'd made a promise to my grandfather, Arthur. That was the only reason I showed up. Mr. Davison cleared his throat, opened a thick file, and began to read the will. His voice was steady, the kind you'd use to read a car manual. "To Isabel Thorne," he announced, "I leave the coastal property in Seabrook and the vintage art collection." Isabel's expression didn't change, though she must have been expecting the whole company. "To Richard Thorne," he went on, "I leave my collection of antique maps and a $25,000 donation in his name to the National Center for Corporate Integrity." My father scoffed. "Is that a joke?" Mr. Davison remained impassive. He turned the page. "And to Caleb Thorne, my grandson, and the only one who ever saw the world as I did, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate. This includes all financial assets, properties, and controlling shares in Apex Innovations, effective immediately." A heavy silence fell over the room. My father's jaw clenched. Isabel's confident smile faltered. Mr. Davison then slid a cashier's check toward me. The amount was written in crisp, black ink, $42,781,000. Before my fingers could even graze the paper, Richard lunged across the table, snatching the check as if it had personally offended him. "You think this buys your way back in?" he snarled. Then, right there, in front of the lawyer and my sister, he flicked open a gold-plated lighter and set the check ablaze. The paper curled and blackened, the flame consuming Arthur Thorne's signature. Isabel let out a small gasp. Mr. Davison leaned back, his face a mask of professional neutrality. My father looked at me, his eyes cold. "That's for walking away." I didn't react. I didn't raise my voice, I just smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who already knew the final move in a chess game. He hadn't burned what he thought he had. He hadn't seen the other envelope, the one tucked safely in my jacket pocket. The one my grandfather had given me a month before he passed, folded inside a diner napkin. "Don't open this unless they try to burn it," he'd said. They had. So I would. But first, I had to endure the fallout. Isabel immediately began insisting that something was clearly wrong, that grandfather wasn't in his right mind. My father accused Mr. Davison of orchestrating the whole thing, of forging the document. They argued, their voices rising, filling the polished room with their outrage. I just sat there, feeling the last of the heat from the burning check dissipate, and watched them unravel. The thing about people like my father and sister is that they only recognize power they can see. Burn the paper, and you burn the fortune. Shout the loudest, and you win the argument. Erase a name and the person ceases to exist. But they didn't know me. They didn't know the person forged in the deserts of Afghanistan. The person who learned that survival often meant being invisible. They didn't know what my grandfather had told me the day I left for basic training. You're the only one I trust to see this through. So when my father brushed the ashes from the table and declared I was out, I smiled, because I knew I was the only one left in the game. Under the table, my hand rested on the envelope in my coat. I wasn't going anywhere empty-handed. I stood up and walked out without a word, the sound of my boots echoing on the marble floor. The drive back to my small apartment was silent. The city felt alien, a place I had returned to but no longer belonged. The envelope sat on the passenger seat, a silent testament to my grandfather's foresight. Back in my kitchen, I poured a glass of water and stared out at the gray cityscape. The weight of the morning, the inheritance, the fire, the cold silence felt suffocatingly familiar. It reminded me of coming home from my first deployment. It had been Thanksgiving. I'd been gone nearly 2 years. I came back with a persistent ringing in my ear and memories I'd never share. But when I walked through the door, my father's only words were, "You missed your mother's birthday. No welcome home, no, we're glad you're safe." Just a quiet, suffocating judgment. My childhood bedroom had been erased. The walls were repainted. The furniture replaced with a sterile guest set. A framed print of a serene beach hung where my photos used to be. It looked like a hotel room. Isabel had walked past me in the hallway, a smirk on her face. "Don't be so dramatic," she'd said. "You were gone. Life moved on." I left that day and never went back. I found a cheap apartment and worked security gigs. Every month, a small, anonymous wire transfer from A. Thorne would appear in my account, just enough to cover rent and food. I knew it was him. Grandfather Arthur had always seen me. When I was a boy and wanted to join a youth military program, he bought me my first pair of proper boots. When my father dismissed my ambitions, Grandfather said, "Maybe that's because you understand loyalty, son. It's something business schools don't teach." He never took sides. He just took mine. That's why when he got sick, I knew. I visited him once at a small diner he liked. Over coffee, he gave me the napkin-wrapped envelope. "Don't open this unless they burn it," he'd repeated. I thought he was being theatrical. "What? You think they'll literally light my inheritance on fire?" I'd joked. He hadn't smiled. "I think they'll try to erase you," he said. Now, standing in my kitchen, I finally understood. I picked up the heavy envelope, broke the wax seal, and pulled out a folded document and a small USB drive. The paper was a notarized trust transfer form, dated 3 weeks before his death. The check had been a decoy. The real funds were already mine, transferred quietly and legally through a digital chain of command my father would never be able to penetrate. At the bottom of the page was an account number ending in the digits of my own birthday. He knew I'd notice. I plugged the USB into my laptop. A single folder appeared. Legacy. Inside were bank statements, legal authorizations, and documents detailing the transfer of control for Apex Innovations. I logged into my bank's mobile app to check the new account. An error message appeared. Account not found. I tried again. Nothing. It felt like more than a glitch. I called the bank. A bored-sounding representative named Kevin asked for my details. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thorne," he said after a long pause. "Our system shows this account holder is deceased." "That's impossible," I said, my voice steady. "It was certified by the Office of Vital Records 2 weeks ago, sir." I hung up. My next stop was the DMV. After an hour-long wait, the clerk looked at my ID, then at her screen. "Sir," she said, her voice low, "there's a flag on your file. You're listed as legally deceased." "I'm standing right here." "I see that, but the system says otherwise. You'll have to file for a correction." "How long will that take?" She shrugged. "Could be months." Walking out onto the street, I felt like a ghost. Someone had gone to great lengths to make me disappear. Across the street, a woman in a familiar blue coat stood watching me. My stepmother, Eleanor. The one who had vanished from our lives shortly after marrying my father. She just stood there, a silent, ominous figure, then turned and walked away. Back at my apartment, I tore through a box of old letters from my grandfather. Tucked inside one was a small brass key with a tag, Westwood Storage, Unit 3B. He'd given it to me years ago. "You'll know when to use this," he'd said. Westwood Storage was a run-down facility on the edge of town. An automated kiosk granted me access. Unit 3B was cold and smelled of dust. Inside, a single fireproof case sat on a metal shelf. I opened it. Inside was another cashier's check for the same amount. But this one was printed on secure paper with a shimmering watermark. Taped to it was a note in my grandfather's hand. The first one was a test. This one is the truth. The case also contained a manila envelope. "Trust no one," a sticky note on the front read. "Not even her." I knew he meant Eleanor. Inside were printouts of emails and meeting minutes from Apex Innovations. He had documented everything. My sister's name was on several documents, authorizing asset transfers I knew nothing about. The final item was another flash drive, this one in a velvet pouch. A note attached said, "Watch this alone." I raced back to my apartment, locked the door, and plugged in the drive. A video file opened. My grandfather's face appeared on the screen, tired but resolute. "Caleb," he said, his voice clear, "if you're seeing this, they did exactly what I feared. I watched them dismiss you, use your service against you. I stayed silent for too long. That ends now." He leaned closer to the camera. "I left it all to you. Not just the money, but the company, the foundation. You know what's right. Your father will try to erase you. He will use your past as a weapon. Let him." He offered a faint smile. Because the only thing more dangerous than a man with power is a man with the truth. The screen went black. I sat in the dark, the weight of his words settling over me. I laid out the documents from the envelope, tracing the lines of deceit. One name stood out. Dr. Alistair Finch, a retired physician who had made house calls for my family. An email showed he had submitted a letter to the estate court attesting to my long-term mental instability. I had never met the man. I found his address and drove there. The house was dark, but I waited. An hour later, an elderly man pulled into the driveway. It was Dr. Finch. I confronted him, my voice low and even. "You signed a false document about me. I need to know who told you to do it." He looked terrified. "It was Richard Thorne," he whispered. "He said you were unwell, that you were suffering from trauma after your time in the service. He made it sound like a mercy." "And you believed him?" "I signed what he gave me. I thought it was just a formality for the inheritance." "Get a lawyer," I told him, then walked away. The casual cruelty of it all was staggering. I drove straight to the one person I knew could help me navigate this war. Marcus Blackwood was a brilliant, disgraced lawyer who now worked for veterans out of his chaotic apartment. He took one look at the files I brought and grinned. "This is better than illegal," he said. "This is righteous." He examined the forged documents. "Classic," he muttered. "They used a shell corporation. Sloppy. They didn't think you'd fight back." "They declared me dead," I said. "That's more than just a fight." Marcus nodded. "I'll need your service records, anything with your signature on it." I handed him another file. He called in a forensic analyst, a quiet man named Leo Kent, who could spot a forgery from a mile away. Leo took one look at the signature on the fraudulent transfer documents. "It's a lift," he said without hesitation. "Scanned from a military document. Poorly done, too. The pressure is all wrong. I can write an affidavit that will tear this apart in court." Marcus leaned forward. "This is the thread, Caleb. We pull it, and their whole empire unravels. This isn't just a civil case anymore. This is wire fraud, conspiracy, perjury." He looked me in the eye. "Do you want justice or revenge?" "I want what's mine," I said. "Good," Marcus said, a predatory gleam in his eye. "We'll give them a war they can't win. For now, stay quiet. Let them think they've won. Let them think you're still a ghost." I left his office with a burner phone and a plan. The war had already begun. This was just the first shot. I drove to my own storage unit, a dusty garage I rented under a false name. Inside was a footlocker containing every piece of paper from my military career, hard copies of every signature I'd ever made. I brought them all to Marcus. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I remembered an interview Isabel had dodged months ago. I found the reporter's number and made the call. It was time to bring the truth into the light.